There's a pattern emerging across countries that once defined the modern world, and the United Kingdom is one of the clearest examples of it. Not collapse, not revolution, not chaos in the streets, but a slow, grinding erosion of political stability that everyone sees, everyone feels, but no one in power seems able or willing to fix. To understand what's happening inside Britain right now, you have to step away from the headlines and look at the deeper structural forces. Because the story isn't just about one prime minister or one party. It's about a system that has entered a cycle of instability so repetitive that it has normalized dysfunction. And the numbers tell the story better than any politician ever will. Number one, the UK is experiencing unprecedented government turnover. Political instability in Britain isn't internet narrative. It is measurable. Since 2016, the UK has had 5 prime ministers in 7 years, multiple snap elections, record-level intra-party leadership battles. By comparison, between 1979 and 2010, a period of 31 years, the UK had only 5 prime ministers total. The level of turnover is not normal for an established parliamentary democracy. It signals something deeper, a political system where leadership collapses not because of ideological defeat, but because internal fractures have become stronger than any mandate from the public. And this is where the pattern begins. Number 2, public trust has fallen off a cliff. The UK's trust levels aren't just low, they are historically low. According to the British Social Attitude Survey in 2023, only 12% of Britons trust the government most of the time. This is the slowest ever recorded since the survey began in the 1980s. The Institute for Government in 2023 found that trust in political institutions is now at levels usually associated with nations experiencing profound democratic strain. This matters for one reason. A government cannot function if the governed no longer believe the system is working. And in Britain, the public doesn't believe it anymore. Number 3, Brexit didn't create the crisis, it revealed it. People often point to Brexit as the origin of the UK's instability, but that's only half the story. Brexit exposed a political elite out of touch with the electorate, a public deeply divided on national identity, institutions not built to handle high conflict governance. Nearly 52% voted leave in 2016, but the years that followed weren't about enacting a policy decision. They were about exposing how fragile the UK's consensus politics really were. Parliament spent years effectively paralyzed, parties fractured internally, leadership became a revolving door. Brexit wasn't the disease, it was the MRI scan. It showed Britain a picture of itself, and the image wasn't flattering. Number 4, the economy is not matching the politics. The UK has experienced stagnant growth for over a decade, according to the OECD in 2023. The UK ranks near the bottom of the G7 countries in productivity growth. Real wages have been largely flat since 2008. This is one of the longest periods of wage stagnation since the Napoleonic era. Add to that, inflation spiking to 11.1% in 2022, that's the highest since 1981, a cost of living crisis hitting households across the UK. Food bank usage hitting record highs, with the Trussell Trust reporting 2.99 million food parcels distributed in 2023 to 24, the most ever recorded. Economic stress becomes political stress. Political stress becomes institutional instability. Institutional instability becomes public distrust. The cycle feeds itself. Number 5, immigration pressures are intensifying tensions. The UK has always been a multi-ethnic democracy, but immigration levels in recent years have created tension far beyond the political class. According to the UK Office for National Statistics, net migration in 2022 reached 745,000, the highest in British history. Whether one supports or opposes immigration, this level of demographic pressure introduces challenges in public services, housing, infrastructure, social cohesion. And when political leaders fail to manage this pressure effectively, the public interprets it as either incompetence or indifference. The anger isn't ideological, it is practical. Number 6, the National Health Service is on life support. If you want to measure a country's stability, look at the health of its public services, especially the ones people rely on for survival. The NHS is facing record waiting times, workforce shortages, historic strikes, budget pressures that the government cannot reconcile. As of late 2023, over 7.7 million people were on waiting lists for treatment, the highest number ever recorded. A failing healthcare system doesn't just create frustration, it creates existential fear, and fear changes the political temperature of a country. Number 7, crime and policing confidence are eroding. The Metropolitan Police, this is Britain's most powerful police force, faced a devastating independent review in 2023. The Casey report concluded that the Metropolitan Police was institutionally racist, institutionally misogynistic, institutionally homophobic. This wasn't a fringe opinion. This was an official government-commissioned finding. Confidence in policing dropped sharply, especially after high-profile scandals such as the murder of Sarah Everard by a serving police officer, multiple misconduct cases involving abuse of authority. When public safety institutions lose legitimacy, people begin looking for alternative sources of order. Historically, that's where populism grows. Number 8, the UK's global role is shrinking. For decades, Britain was a geopolitical heavyweight, a permanent UN Security Council member, nuclear power, global economic hub. But today, the UK is no longer among the top 5 economies, losing relevance in European security policy, increasingly dependent on the US to project power. The world has changed and Britain hasn't fully adapted. Domestic instability leads to foreign policy ambiguity. Ambiguity leads to strategic weakness, and strategic weakness accelerates domestic instability. When you zoom out from the headlines about the UK, the election swings, the leadership collapses, the economic frustrations, you start to see something that most people miss. The real problem isn't the politicians. It's the architecture of the system they're operating inside. That's why every election in the UK feels the same now. A new face, a different slogan. A few months of optimism, and then the same cycle of frustration returns. Because the system itself hasn't adapted to the pressures shaping modern society. Let's break those pressures down. Pressure point number 1, the economic reality no one can outrun. The cost of living crisis in the UK isn't just about inflation. It's about the collapse of the post-2008 economic model. For 15 years, the UK has relied on suppressed wages, asset inflation, cheap labor, cheap debt, and financial engineering. That model produced growth on paper, but it suffocated the middle class. What you're seeing today is the delayed bill. Workers feel poorer, small businesses feel squeezed, young families feel locked out of opportunity, and politicians keep promising growth that never arrives. This isn't mismanagement, it's structural exhaustion. Pressure point 2, a political system built for stability, not reality. The UK Parliament is designed for incrementalism, a slow, predictable system built for a world where crises were occasional. But in the modern world, crises are continuous. Pandemics, energy shocks, mass migration, housing shortages, a digital economy reshaping labor, global powers competing for influence. The British political structure moves at the speed of the 1950s, while the problems move at the speed of 2025. That gap creates anger. Because people don't just want representation, they want responsiveness. And when the government can't respond, frustration metastasizes into distrust. Pressure point 3, fragmentation of national identity. This is the part nobody in the UK wants to talk about. There is no longer a shared definition of what British means. Different regions, different economic realities, different cultural expectations. And for the first time in modern history, those identities are drifting in opposite directions. National unity isn't fading, it's fracturing. London lives in a different world than the Midlands. Scotland is emotionally closer to independence now than any point since the referendum. Generational divides are widening. Political parties are splintering faster than they can replace leaders. When a nation can't agree on its identity, its institutions lose their gravitational pull. Pressure point 4, the erosion of institutional trust. Trust isn't lost suddenly, it drains slowly. And in the UK, trust in Parliament, the media, the civil service, law enforcement oversight, and even major charities has eroded year after year. When people stop believing the system is accountable, they stop believing the system is legitimate. And once legitimacy erodes, every decision, even good ones, is interpreted through suspicion. That is exactly where the UK is now. Pressure point 5. The information environment is overwhelmingly the political environment. British politics is still operating in a broadcast-era mindset. Carefully crafted messaging, predictable narratives, slow, deliberate positioning. But modern citizens live in a digital shock ecosystem. Information is instant. Opinion is weaponized. Outrage is monetized. Narratives shift hourly. The political system cannot keep up with the sensory bandwidth of the population. That mismatch creates volatility, and volatility destabilizes democracies faster than ideology ever could. The UK isn't collapsing, it's transitioning. The most important part. What you see in the UK isn't an isolated failure. It's a signal, a preview of the next phase of Western governance. And this is where our breakdown pivots into the bigger picture. The UK isn't alone. Other Western nations are experiencing rising distrust, political polarization, institutional detachment, economic stagnation, demographic pressure, identity fragmentation, and digital era destabilization. The same ingredients, the same trajectory, the same predictable outcome. The UK is just further along the curve. What happens there shows us what's coming elsewhere. And that brings us to the next section where I'm going to zoom out and examine the pattern that's spreading across the entire Western world. Before we move forward, if this analysis is giving you clarity, if it's helping you connect the dots in some form, if it's helping you connect the dots the media keeps separate, make sure you follow me on TikTok for the rapid fire breakdowns. And stay tuned at the end because I'll tell you where you can find my new podcast where I go even deeper. Now, let's get into the bigger picture. Because the UK is not the exception, it is the blueprint. When you step back from the UK and widen the frame, something becomes unmistakably clear. The political, economic, and cultural instability we're seeing isn't a British problem. It's a Western problem, a systemic problem, a civilization stage problem. And the pattern is the same everywhere. Whether you look at the United States, Canada, Australia, Germany, France, the Netherlands, or the broader EU, the symptoms repeat almost perfectly. And once you recognize the pattern, you stop interpreting these crises as isolated failures. You start seeing them as signals of a broader shift taking place across the West. Let's break that shift down clearly and directly. Number one, the elasticity of societies is snapping. For decades, Western nations absorbed stress without breaking. Economic strain, absorbed. Political division, absorbed. Immigration pressure, absorbed. Institutional mistakes, absorbed. But elasticity isn't infinite. And after a global recession, a decade of stagnant wages, a pandemic, a housing collapse, a generational wealth divide, digital age overstimulation, and declining trust in institutions, the social fabric is stretched to its limit. People are no longer absorbing shocks, they're reacting to them. And reaction is always louder than resilience. Number two, governments can no longer meet modern expectations. Every Western country is facing the same impossible math. Citizens want affordable housing, functioning healthcare, secure borders, strong policing, transparent institutions, economic mobility, stable energy, and of course, low taxes. But the state isn't structurally capable of delivering all of that anymore. Governments built for the industrial era cannot manage digital era complexity. So instead, they default to messaging, distraction, incremental adjustments, and short-term crisis response, all while the public's expectations move faster than the institutions meant to serve them. This creates the emotional gap that defines the modern West. People are angrier than the system is capable of responding. Number three, the middle class is losing its anchoring role. For centuries, the middle class acted as the stabilizing force of the Western democracies. Stable jobs, predictable housing, civic engagement, social mobility. Today, the middle class is shrinking. Housing costs are suffocating. Debt is exploding. Upward mobility is collapsing. And the path to stability no longer feels attainable. When the middle class loses faith, democracies lose equilibrium. This isn't ideology. It's math, sociology, it's history. Every era of political upheaval began with the middle class disillusionment. Number four, identity is no longer shared. The modern West is experiencing something new. Pluralism without cohesion, diversity without integration, democracy without consensus. Citizens no longer share a common media ecosystem, a common set of facts, a common cultural baseline, or even a common understanding of what their country is. You cannot maintain long-term institutional legitimacy when the people no longer share a story about themselves. Because institutions don't survive on laws alone. They survive on collective meaning. Right now, that meaning is crumbling. Number 5, the information environment is too fast for governance. This may be the most important dynamic of all. Modern citizens are overstimulated, constantly outraged, emotionally exhausted, politically tribal, and drowning in contradictory information. Meanwhile, governments still move at the speed of committees, procedures, and parliamentary calendars. The result? The population accelerates, the state lags. The population reacts emotionally, the state responds bureaucratically. The population wants clarity, the state produces ambiguity. That mismatch is destabilizing every Western nation simultaneously. Number 6, trust is the new battleground. Every Western power is facing the same crisis. Not a crisis of economics, not a crisis of borders, not a crisis of leadership. A crisis of trust. And once trust breaks, everything downstream becomes fragile. Elections, policing, media, institutions, experts, and national identity itself. Trust is the foundation of stability, and right now the West is standing on fractured ground. So what's actually happening? Here's the truth the media won't articulate, or refuses to. We are living through the end of one governing model and the beginning of another. Not collapse, not revolution, not apocalypse. A transition, a reordering, a restructuring of expectations, institutions, and political reality. The UK is in transition. France is in transition. Germany is in transition. Australia is in transition. Canada is in transition. The US is in transition. And transitions feel like chaos while you're living through them. This isn't about ideology or partisanship. This is about the architecture of Western civilization recalibrating under the pressures of a new era. So where does this go next? If the pattern holds, and history suggests it will, the next phases are predictable. Phase 1, institutional volatility. Phase 2, political realignment. Phase 3, public detachment. Phase 4, emergence of new reformist movements. Phase 5, construction of a new national consensus. We are currently between Phase 1 and Phase 2 across most Western nations. The old systems are straining, and the new ones have not yet formed. This is the danger zone, but it is also the opportunity zone. Because once the public loses fear of questioning systems, they become willing to rebuild them. If this last part connected the dots for you, if it helped you see the pattern underneath the politics, then don't stop with this long-form video. This channel is where I break down the big picture, but the daily battlefield is over on my TikTok page. That's where I post rapid-fire geopolitical updates, micro breakdowns, media analysis, and the signals people miss until they explode in the headlines. Follow me over on TikTok, the Watchman 98, for daily intelligence, daily clarity, daily situational awareness. And if you want to go deeper, much deeper, the conversation continues on my brand new podcast, the Watchman 98. It's now streaming on Spotify. I cover mindset, discipline, geopolitics, the framework you need for the world that's coming. Don't just watch the news. Don't just react to the chaos. Understand the pattern. Recognize the shift. Stay ahead of the curve. Follow on TikTok, join the podcast, and as always, continue to stand watch.